You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. On today's episode, we're previewing the Test series between the West Indies and Australia. For the first time since 2015, Australia will be playing a Test series in the Caribbean. The 2025 Test series will be a 3-test match series, the first time that Australia and the West Indies have played a 3-match Test series, and you have to go back to 2015-16 when the West Indies toured Australia for that series. That was the last time that Australia and the West Indies played 3 Test matches in a series. Also, 2025 marks 30 years since Australia's famous Test series victory in the West Indies in 1995. That series victory has marked 30 years of dominance from Australia over the West Indies in Test series and have a stranglehold on the Sir Frank Worrall Trophy, which Australia will be looking to hold for another series. And for the West Indies in this series, be looking to try and wrestle it back after 30 years of dominance from Australia. The West Indies will be hoping that they can put out a better performance against Australia in this Test series. It's at home, pressure, home conditions. They'll be hoping to put on a good show. And Australia would like to bounce back after the World Test Championship final defeat to South Africa and get ready for the preparation in terms of the Ashes at the end of the year. So both teams are approaching this series in different directions. Both teams are sort of looking towards the future, resetting. The West Indies looking to try and get something going after years of, disappointment really, and looking to just try and build consistency in their Test cricket. Whereas with Australia, a great team nonetheless, will be hoping to look towards the future a little bit in terms of resetting, going forward, and hoping to put in a good performance in this series against the West Indies, but also for the Ashes at the end of the year. And looking to achieve a lot more things as well in terms of achievements and looking to build on the momentum this great Australian team has pretty much built over the last few years under Pat Cummins' leadership. So the West Indies and Australia, it's always a great time when the West Indies and Australia play a Test series in the Caribbean, the first time in more than 10 years since 2015. So it will be an exciting series. It's good to see Test cricket back in the West Indies. It's good to see Australia back in the West Indies. And no doubt this series will provide some entertainment. So there's plenty to talk about, plenty to discuss and unpack as we talk about the West Indies and Australia and their chances and what to expect from both teams in the series over the 3 Test matches in June and July. So plenty to talk about and discuss on this preview episode of the Test series between the West Indies and Australia. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. To kick off this preview episode for this Test series between the West Indies and Australia, let's have a look at the 3 Test matches and where all 3 Test matches will be played in terms of the Test series fixture and reacquaint ourselves with the 3 Test matches and the venues and the dates. So the first Test of the series will be at the Kensington Oval, and that will be on the 25th of June. The second Test will be at the National Cricket Stadium. That's on the 3rd of July. And the third and final Test of the series will be at Sabina Park. And that Test match will be a day-night Test with the pink ball. And that will be on the 13th of July to wrap up the series between the West Indies and Australia. So there's the 3 Test matches, the venues and the dates, and the fixture for this Test series between the West Indies and Australia. Let's move on and talk about the Test stats between the West Indies and Australia. Have a look at the stats, the records head-to-head, and some of the other stats as well between Australia and the West Indies when it comes to Test cricket. So first of all, let's have a look at the head-to-head record in Test matches between the West Indies and Australia. Australia lead the head-to-head, 61 wins to the West Indies 33. Both teams' record in the West Indies in Test matches. Australia lead the head-to-head in that, 21 wins for Australia in the Caribbean, 14 to the West Indies. Leading run scorer between the two countries, well, not a surprise, Brian Lara, 2,815 runs. Leading wicket taker, Courtney Walsh, 135 wickets. Most dismissals, Jeff Dujon with 84. Most catches, Mark Ward, not a surprise there, with 45. Most matches, Courtney Walsh with 38. And the first test match that the West Indies and Australia played was way back in 1930. So some of the stats between the West Indies and Australia in test cricket. Let's talk about the West Indies and have a look at their chances of winning the series against Australia in terms of their squad and what they need to do to win the series if they can. It's going to be a tall order. So before we do that, let's have a look at the West Indies squad that they've selected for the 3 test matches against Australia. Chase, Warrican, Anderson, Braithwaite, Campbell, Carty, Greaves, Hope, Imlach, Azari Joseph, Shamar Joseph, King, Lorraine, Louis, Phillip and Seals. And that's the squad that the West Indies have assembled for this test series against Australia. Now, as we all know, with the West Indies over the last few years and even for a long time, they have declined very much in test cricket. The decline of test cricket and the quality of test cricket in the West Indies has been very evident for some time. And with Roston Chase as a new captain, Darren Sammy as coach, the West Indies approaching this series against Australia will be hoping to turn things around, hoping to build consistency, hoping to get a few victories and hopefully win a series or 2. But going into this series against Australia, it's going to be a challenge for the West Indies. I think that's pretty straightforward, pretty plain to see that, you know, they're up against a very good Australian team who we'll talk about in a minute with Australia. But for the West Indies, it is going to be a tall order. It's going to be a challenge. But can the new captain, Roston Chase of the Test side, he took over from Craig Braithwaite, can he lead the team to something special? And for the West Indies, their last Test series in Australia, which was back in 2023-24, they had that memorable Test match win at the Gabba, where Shamar Joseph took 7 wickets. So can they carry on that momentum going into this Test series against Australia? Also, another thing for the West Indies in their favour is home conditions. They're playing at home, and whereas Australia, they haven't been in the Caribbean for 10 years, not since 2015. So definitely the West Indies have the advantage there. But as I said before, it is going to be a challenge. It is going to be a big test for the West Indies against Australia, no doubt about that. Now, you have a look at their squad. Their squad that they've assembled has a lot of change from the squad that they took to Australia back in 2023-24 for that Test series where they won at the Gabba and they drew that series 1-1. So there's been a lot of change in the squad since that Test series for the West Indies against Australia back in 23-24 in Australia. So they only have 5 players that played in that Test series in 23-24 against Australia. And that's Azari Joseph, Greaves, Imlach, Shamar Joseph, and Craig Braithwaite, the former captain. So it just shows you that the West Indies have gone through some major changes in terms of their Test side over the last couple of years since they played that Test series in Australia where they won at the Gabba in 23-24. So it just shows you what sort of direction they're going in. They're trying different players. They're hoping to build a squad and a core group of players who are going to be very successful at the Test level. So what are the challenges for the West Indies? Well, I think there are 2 distinct challenges that they will face. Number one is the batting side of things and the bowling side of things. So we'll start with the batting side of things and the challenges there. Look, with their batting unit, you have a look at their stats. They're not the best reading in terms of the statistics. The only one who's most prolific in terms of the batting side of things for the West Indies is the former captain, Craig Braithwaite. 5,935 runs at an average of 33 and 12 centuries. And you have a look at the other batters in the side, the likes of Campbell, Carty, Hope, Imlach, Louis, Chase, Greaves, the all-rounders. Their stats are not really that flash. So it just shows you that their batting side of things for the West Indies is going to be tested, especially up against a very good quality Australian attack with the likes of Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood, Lyon, and you've also got Scott Boland. Plus, you've got Kuhneman and Bo Webster who are going to chip in there with some overs here and there throughout the series. So the major challenge for the West Indies is their batting. Can they score enough runs? They're going to rely heavily on Craig Braithwaite, the seniority that he possesses, the experience that he possesses, but they're also going to rely heavily on Shai Hope, who we know can bat very well in Test cricket. We saw a couple of years ago, a few years ago now, I should say, back in 2017, where he scored those hundreds against England and got the West Indies over the line in that Test match. I do believe it was at Edgbaston in that day-night Test. Obviously, Shai Hope, the captain of the one-day and T20 side for the West Indies, he's got a lot of experience as well, but he's been in and out of the Test side for a while. He's coming back into the Test side. So you would think for the West Indies, in terms of their batting side of things, they're going to rely heavily on Braithwaite, probably Shai Hope with that experience. The other guys need to really step up. And also Roston Chase. We know Roston Chase can bat, the captain, obviously the all-rounder, bowling his spin, but also his batting. And in Test cricket, he's averaging 26. He's got 500s, Roston Chase, in Test cricket. So he can definitely bat. He needs to stand up as well and lead from the front as captain. So my concern with the West Indies, and I think everyone shares the same concerns as well, is that are they going to score enough runs against a good quality bowling attack that Australia possessed? Now, we saw that in the last series in 23-24 in Australia. They did struggle, especially in that series with the bats. So they really need to pick that up. Also, the experience against Australia. You have a look at their batters and their experience in Test cricket against Australia. You have, obviously, Shai Hope's played against Australia in Test cricket before, Braithwaite, Chase and Greaves, and that's about it in terms of their batting group. The other batters haven't even played a Test against Australia before, so that will be a very important thing for those players I mentioned, Braithwaite, Hope, Chase, Greaves. Certainly having that experience against the Australian bowling attack, they really got to use that to their advantage to help the other batters who haven't got that experience of facing this quality Australian attack in this series. So for the West Indies, they really got to stand up with the bat. And if they can, get some runs on the board, that will help them massively in terms of trying to get some momentum with the bat and trying to score big runs in the series. But I do really see them struggling in that department of their game, is that can the batting group hold up against Australia in terms of the bowling attack? On paper, you would say probably not because of the stats that they have in their career thus far. But home ground advantage, Australia haven't played in the West Indies for more than 10 years, may work in their favour. But we'll have to wait and see what happens over the 3 Test matches, whether or not they can deliver. So the senior players, Roston Chase, the captain, Craig Braithwaite, Shai Hope. You've also got, Justin Greaves as well, who's played a bit of Test cricket for, certainly against Australia, I should say. So they're going to rely heavily on those with the bat in terms of picking up the slack. In terms of the batting side of things, the West Indies. So that's going to be a big challenge for them in terms of, can they score enough runs to really put Australia under pressure? Can they score enough runs to give their bowlers something to defend? That remains to be seen. So that's a big challenge for the West Indies. Their batting is going to be really tested. The bowling side of things as well, the bowling group, can they take 20 wickets? That is the next question for the West Indies. That's going to be a big test for them. You have a look at their bowlers. They've got Warrican, the Josephs, Shamar and Azari Joseph. You've got Phillips, Seals, Chase and Greaves. Their bowling lineup. There's no Kemar Roach. Kemar Roach is not in this squad. So they're going to miss his experience. And Kemar Roach is, the top 10 leading wicket takers in Test cricket for the West Indies. He burst onto the scene many, many years ago. We remember when he bowled to Ricky Ponting in that 2009 series in Australia. He bowled pretty quick and fast. So he's definitely a great bowler, certainly for the West Indies, but they're going to miss that experience with the ball there, the West Indies. So it's going to be important that the senior bowlers in the side, you have a look at that. It's going to be important for Azari Joseph, Roston Chase to really stand up with the ball for the West Indies. They're the two most experienced bowlers that the West Indies have got in terms of test match experience. Azari Joseph's played 37 tests, taken 111 wickets. Roston Chase, 85 wickets in 49 test matches, the captain. So they're going to rely heavily on those two bowlers to really lead from the front and to, really, make sure that the bowling side of things can work out for them. And also the big talking point, Shamar Joseph. Now, we all know what Shamar Joseph did at the Gabba back in 2023-24 in that series where the West Indies won and he took 7 wickets and he bowled with absolute pace and he was very lethal and quick. So the West Indies will be hoping he can repeat that type of performance against Australia this time around in the Caribbean. He's going to be a very important cog in the bowling attack as well for the West Indies, Shamar Joseph, with that raw pace. And he's also got a good record against Australia. Early on in his test career, he's only played the 8 test matches. He hasn't played a lot of test cricket since that Gabba test match where he took 7 wickets against Australia, Shamar Joseph. He hasn't played a lot since. So it'll be interesting to see how he will approach this series. But he's going to be important for the West Indies. He's sort of their X factor. You've got Azari Joseph who can bowl quick on his day, but Shamar Joseph's just got something else. And with Australia, in terms of their top order going under some massive changes in this series, which we'll talk about in a minute with Australia in terms of the batting, the top order for Australia. They've got Cameron Green, who's batting at number 3. Josh Inglis is going to come in and bat at number 4. Sam Constas is back into the side to open with Usman Khawaja. So if the West Indies can take early wickets and expose that inexperienced top order that Australia have, who haven't batted a lot with each other before, then they're a chance of putting Australia under some sort of pressure in the series with the ball. So major challenges there for the West Indies in terms of the bowling side of things. Can the bowlers be disciplined, bowl good lines and lengths, and be able to take 20 wickets? That's going to be the real test. Azari Joseph's got to stand up. Shamar Joseph, Roston Chase with the ball. They're going to lead the attack and they're going to lead the West Indies into hopefully some success with the ball in the series. So in saying that, just to finish off about the West Indies, it is going to be a major task. Not a lot of them have them the favourites to win this series, and that's probably a fair assessment given where the West Indies are at with their test cricket. So the batting side of things, can they score runs? The bowling side of things, can they take wickets? It's pretty simple. They've got to be consistent throughout the 3 test matches. They've got to be consistent. And if they can do that, well, then who knows? They may cause some upsets and they may cause a surprise. But it remains to be seen for the West Indies. It remains to be seen. But it is going to be a test. Roston Chase as captain, newly appointed, taken over from Craig Braithwaite, Darren Sammy as coach. Let's see what the West Indies can do across the 3 test matches. They're going to have their challenges, but are they good enough to overcome the challenges that they have with the bat and with the ball? That remains to be seen once the series is over. Then we can make those judgments. But they're definitely up against it. Not the favourites you would think to win the series, but if the West Indies can show some competitiveness, be consistent, and just give some hope to the West Indian supporters, I think that's a realistic goal for the West Indies rather than win the series. So it'd be interesting to see what they can do across the 3 test matches, the West Indies. So only time will tell whether or not the West Indies are good enough to overcome those challenges with the bat and with the ball, and can they overcome the juggernaut of Australia and end their dominance in the Sir Frank Worrall Trophy, which has been more than 30 years of dominance, and the West Indies haven't tasted success in more than 30 years against Australia. So time will tell at the end of the series. We move on from the West Indies, and now let's talk about Australia and talk about their chances. And what are they going to do in this series against the West Indies? For Australia, it's their first test series in the West Indies for the first time in more than 10 years, since 2015. So it's been a long time since Australia have toured the Caribbean. But it's good to see Australia back, and it's good to see the West Indies and Australia playing against each other in Test cricket in the Caribbean for the first time in more than 10 years. Australia have a pretty strong record against the West Indies in the last 30 years. As I mentioned at the top of the episode in the introduction, that Australia, it's 30 years in 2025 that Australia won that famous Test series under Mark Taylor back in 1995, which really started the dominance for Australia in Test cricket. And it really started the changing of the guard. The West Indies were dominant for so long. By 1995, they were coming towards the end of their great cycle and great era. Mark Taylor led the Australian team over there. Were able to beat them in that 5-game Test series. And Australia started their dominance in Test cricket. And that really started the dominance for Australia in the Sir Frank Worrall Trophy against the West Indies for more than 30 years. The last time Australia lost a Test series to the West Indies was way back in 1993. They lost that series 2-1. That's the last Test series that Australia have lost against the West Indies, and that's more than 30 years ago. And that's way back in 1993 where they lost 2-1. So Australia have a pretty good record in the Sir Frank Worrall Trophy, which they've won 15 times. The West Indies have won it 8 times, and there's been 3 drawn series. The last series in Australia in 23-24 was a drawn series where Australia won the first Test in Adelaide and obviously lost the second Test at the Gabba, where Shamar Joseph took 7 wickets. So Australia, you would say, definitely the favourites to win this Test series, and you would think they are. But before we talk about Australia in terms of their chances and their squad and what they're going to do in this series against the West Indies, let's first of all have a look at the squad they've selected for this Test series against the West Indies. Cummins, Abbott, Boland, Carey, Green, Hazelwood, Head, Inglis, Kawasha, Constas, Kuhneman, Labuschagne, Lyons, Smith, Stark and Webster. So it's a pretty good squad that Australia have assembled for this Test series against the West Indies. Now, in terms of experience, it's been a long time since Australia have played the West Indies in the Caribbean. It's been more than 10 years, as I mentioned before, since 2015 until now. So there's only 4 players that have experience in Test cricket in the Caribbean. And that's Steve Smith, Nathan Lyon, Josh Hazlewood and Mitchell Stark. They're the only 4 to have experience in Test cricket in the West Indies. The rest of the squad haven't had the experience of playing in these conditions. So you would think Australia will rely heavily on Lyon, Smith and Hazlewood and Stark to pass on that knowledge about conditions here in the West Indies. Nathan Lyon, it's his 3rd tour to the West Indies. He was a part of the 2012 tour that Australia took to the Caribbean, and then in 2015 and now in 2025. So Nathan Lyon's the most senior player when it comes to touring the West Indies. He's on 3 tours. So they will rely heavily on that experience that those 4 players have had in Test cricket in the Caribbean. And look, the other members of the squad, like Pat Cummins, Cameron Green, Travis Head, Josh Inglis, they all played in the T20 World Cup last year in the West Indies for Australia. So they've got that experience. They've got a bit of an understanding of what conditions are like. And also, Australia have played a lot of ODI and T20 series in the Caribbean over the last few years as well. I think the last series was back in 2021 when Australia played some ODIs and T20s. So most of the squad have got experience in those formats as well. So they're not too familiar with the conditions. So they understand what to expect. With Australia, there's been a lot of talking points. There's been a lot of movement. And going into this West Indian series, there's a lot of reflection and reset. Pat Cummins mentioned the word reset after the World Test Championship final defeat to South Africa. Pat Cummins said, we're approaching the new 2-year cycle with an eye to the future, but also resetting and getting things back on track as we, play the 3 Test matches against the West Indies, but also look ahead to the Ashes at the end of the year and looking to try and win that ultimate prize. And Australia have some changing in the batting group. We're going to talk about the top order, who weren't at their best against South Africa in the World Test Championship final, had to be said. But, that's just the way it goes. There's been a lot of change. Sam Constas returns to open the batting. Marnus Labuschagne has been dropped, and the writing was on the wall for Marnus for some time, and that's not a surprise. And Cameron Green is going to be batting at number 3, and Josh Inglis is going to be batting at number 4. That's mainly because of Steve Smith, who has been ruled out of the first test because of that finger injury that he sustained in the World Test Championship final against South Africa. So that's why Josh Inglis gets his opportunity to bat at number 4. So it's a new look top order for Australia in this test series. It's a bit weird not having Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne in the same team. The only time that happened was way back in 2018, I think. I think that's the last time that Australia didn't have Marnus Labuschagne or Steve Smith in the side. Obviously, with Steve Smith, it was his ban during that period in 2018. Marnus got dropped early on in his test career. So that's the last time that Australia didn't have Marnus or Steve Smith in the side. So it's definitely a new look top order for Australia in this test series against the West Indies. But they need to bounce back and they need to build some consistency, not only for this series against the West Indies, but also for the Ashes at the end of the year. Now, we'll start with Marnus Labuschagne. Getting dropped. The writing was on the wall there for Marnus. Look, the World Test Championship final performance where he opened the batting just pretty much summed up where he's at, especially over the last couple of years. His form has dipped significantly. The selectors were very patient and lenient with him. But there comes a point in time where you just say, Marnus, maybe you need a break. And hopefully that will get Marnus back on track. And that's usually the case with Marnus. As I mentioned before, 2018 is the last time that he got dropped, Marnus Labuschagne. So he's been pretty much in the Australian side for the last 5 and 6 years, since 2019 onwards. And he hasn't been dropped. Since he came back in the Ashes in 2019, he hasn't been dropped. But over the last couple of years, we've seen Marnus not really performing well. He's entering one of those patches where batters always enter in their career, is that you have a period where you don't score a lot of runs, you're out of form, there's a lot of pressure from the media, the fans, they demand excellence and they demand blood. And with Marnus, the World Test Championship final was probably the last straw. No doubt he'll be disappointed, but what I'm going to say is that we've seen players throughout the game's history get dropped, come back, and they're often better players for getting dropped. So I think when you get dropped, it makes you realise that, I got to do some work to get back on track and hopefully get back into the side. We know with Marnus, getting dropped, we know with Marnus he loves cricket, and obviously we all know that. He's a bit of a quirky character, he's a bit weird, but that's just who he is. He'll be hurting inside, no doubt about that. Marnus wants to play cricket. And if he's not playing cricket, well, it's like taking a ball away from a dog, they just want to keep going and keep, being engaged. And certainly for Marnus, that's going to be a challenge for him, no doubt, in this period where he's dropped and he's not going to be playing. He's not going to be playing Test cricket for Australia. So for Marnus, hopefully this bit of a sabbatical, hiatus, however you like to call it, hopefully it will make him realise that, there's some things I need to work on, probably take some time away from the game, get out of the spotlight, get out of the pressure cooker. And I think it's a good thing that Marnus has been dropped. A lot of people have said he should have been dropped a bit earlier, but anyway, everyone has their different opinions and views on that. But I think it's good for Marnus just to get out of the pressure cooker. I don't think the selectors did him any good by playing him. Often some people would say, well, you need a play to get out of this rut, get out of this form slump. But other times you probably need to be dropped and get out of the pressure cooker and just go away for a bit. And I think that's what Marnus needs to do. Hopefully we see Marnus back. Hopefully we see him back in the side. Because when he's at his best, he's a very good player. He hasn't been quite at his best over the last few years. So hopefully he can be at his best again. Sam Constas. opening the batting with Usman Khawaja. We saw that in the India series last year, during the last Australian summer. And a good opportunity for Sam Constas. Now, he would have been disappointed not to play in Sri Lanka. He would have been disappointed not to play in the World Test Championship final where Marnus opened the batting instead of him. Now, for Sam Constas, an opportunity for him to get his Test career going. I think if there's one team to get your Test career on track, is probably the West Indies. Now, I'm not trying to be rude or trying to be causing any offence to the West Indies, but with the way the West Indies are playing at the moment, as a young batter like Sam trying to make your way through to Test cricket, you often want to play lesser opposition to try and get into the rhythm and rigours of Test cricket and get some consistency. And I think with Sam, over the 3 Test matches against the West Indies, he'll be hoping to do that. There's been a lot of talk from Sam in the lead up to the series about him learning from what happened in the first 2 Test matches of his career, how to handle that better, how to handle the media better, how to handle his own cricket and his own game and his technique. So there's been a lot of learnings there from Sam, and he's talked about that very openly. So hopefully he can apply the lessons, and it's a great opportunity for him to obviously build momentum and get some momentum going into the Ashes at the end of the year, and hopefully him and Usman Khawaja can get some momentum. Obviously, Usman Khawaja needs some momentum because he hasn't been scoring some runs of late. He's coming towards the end of his career. Hopefully, Sam Constas, with the exuberance of youth, can pass that on to the elder statesman in Usman Khawaja. So a good opportunity for Sam to really probably prove a lot of people wrong. A lot of people have had their opinions about him. You know, we got to remember he's 19 years old. He's going to be a bit naive and a bit, not knowing about everything, a bit immature. But he's definitely reflected on his start to Test cricket and his international career as a cricketer. He's definitely reflected on that, and that's good. And a lot of people in the dressing room have said, he's a deep thinker. He reflects, he learns, he asks a lot of questions. So that's good to see from the youngster and Sam Constas. And hopefully he can, perform well in this West Indian series. Cameron Green and Josh Inglis at number 3 and number 4 for Australia. Now, Pat Cummins has said that we want Cameron Green to be our number 3 for the for this little period, I suppose, in terms of this West Indian series and going into the Ashes. Now with Marnus Labuschagne being dropped. Now, Cameron Green didn't have a great World Test Championship final at number 3. He came in with some good form in county cricket, scoring a few hundreds, but it wasn't the case in the World Test Championship final. A lot of people question about whether or not he should be at number 3, or should he bat down the order where he started his Test career for Australia. But it's a real opportunity for Cameron Green to, get back into Test cricket. We've got to remember he's been out of the game for a year. So I thought Australia would have selected him for the West Indies series and didn't play him in the World Test Championship final, and obviously kept the order the same and didn't change it around with Marnus opening and all that stuff. But they went the other way and they selected him. So I think in this West Indian series for Cameron Green, look, it's an opportunity for him to really get used to batting at number 3, get some time in the middle, get back into the rhythm of Test cricket once again. So it'll be interesting to see how Cameron Green approaches this 3 Test series against the West Indies. And Josh Inglis, good to see him back into the 11. Now, Josh Inglis is back in the team, mainly because of Steve Smith's injury to his finger. Now, Steve Smith popped his finger out as he attempted to catch that ball from Temba Bavuma in the World Test Championship final, and he popped it out. So Josh Inglis comes back into the side to bat at number 4, and Josh Inglis has had a great start to his career. We all know what he did in Sri Lanka in the first Test. He scored 100 on debut, which is not an easy thing to do when you come in on Test debut and score 100. But he definitely looked the part, Josh Inglis. And it'll be interesting to see how he goes in this series. Good opportunity for him. Now with Marnus Labuschagne being dropped, Cameron Green, Josh Inglis, opportunity for them to try and cement their positions in this side. Now, we know Steve Smith's going to come back. So it's only for probably the first test, maybe the whole series where Josh Inglis will probably get a go. Depends if Steve Smith is fit or not with that finger. But at this stage, he's been ruled out of the first test. He hasn't been ruled out of the second or the third test, Steve Smith. So for Josh Inglis and for Cameron Green, it's very important to make the most of the opportunities batting at number 3 and number 4. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. So for Australia's top order, Khawaja, Green, Constas, Inglis. Be interesting to see how they go in terms of their form, because they're all at different form sort of periods, I suppose, different patches in form. Khawaja, getting towards the back end of his career, not been scoring the runs of late. Yes, he scored 200 in Sri Lanka, but let's be honest, that was against Sri Lanka, and it's a really poor bowling attack that they had. Sam Constas, young opener, looking to try and cement his spot. Josh Inglis, Cameron Green looking to score some runs and really book their place in the 11 going forward to the Ashes. So be interesting to see what Australia's new look top order will do. It's a bit of a weird feeling because you don't have Smith and Labuschagne, but Labuschagne's been dropped. Steve Smith's out because of an injury. So he will return to the 11, no doubt, Steve Smith, in this series if he is fit to do so. So the batting side of things for Australia, despite the inexperience at the top of the order, you got some experience with Alex Carey and obviously Travis Head coming in at number 5 and number 7. Bo Webster's had a good start to his career and he will be batting at number 6. So Australia have got some good batting there. And then obviously the tail enders, Pat Cummins, Mitchell Starc, we saw that in the World Test Championship final where he scored a half century. Obviously Nathan Lyon and Josh Hazlewood can hold the bat as well. So the batting side of things for Australia, the inexperience of the top order, but you've still got that experience of the other senior players in the side. The bowling side of things for Australia, there's no challenges there for Australia in terms of the bowling. It's a world-class bowling attack. You've got Cummins, Hazlewood, Starc and Lyon. You've got Scott Boland on the sidelines. You've got Matt Kuhnemann, who may play a role in this series because we know the conditions in the Caribbean may be conducive to playing 2 spinners, and he bowled well in Sri Lanka. Obviously went through the whole debacle with his action and he's been cleared, so that's good news. So hopefully Matt can come out and perform well and do a job. But the Australian bowlers, no problems. As we mentioned with the West Indies earlier, that the Australian bowling attack will definitely test them out in this series, and that's no question about that. You have a look at their stats. It's pretty good to have Cummins, Hazlewood, Starc and Lyon over 300 plus test wickets for all of them. It just shows you how good of an attack they are. Now, we may see Australia employ 2 spinners. Nathan Lyon may be bowling with Kuhnemann. Depends on conditions across the 3 venues of this test series, obviously in the Kensington Oval in Barbados, and then obviously the National Stadium in Grenada, I think. And then obviously the last test in Jamaica in Kingston, so at Sabina Park. So depends on conditions whether or not they'll go with the 2-spinner ploy. And as I said, they'll put the West Indies batters under pressure, and there's no doubt about that. They'll do that given the West Indies' inexperience with their batting, and the Australian bowling attack is certainly going to do that. We may see some rotation as well throughout the series. We may see all of the bowlers get rotated. Won't be surprised if we see Kuhnemann or Scott Boland come in. Depends on conditions, as I mentioned before. But Australia, in terms of their bowling, there's no really big challenges there for them, I should say. They're a world-class attack, and their bowling attack can really do well on all sorts of different conditions. And probably that's going to be the case again here in the West Indies. So for Australia overall, it'll be interesting to see how the inexperienced top order goes. Constas, Green at 3, Inglis at 4. Can they score runs? Can Khawaja get back into some form? And the bowling attack, well, we all know what they can do. So Australia, you would say, even though it's a different lineup in terms of the batting side of things, they're still a pretty good side, and you probably think they are going to put the West Indies under some pressure and probably go on to win this series. So it'd be interesting to see how Australia approach this series against the West Indies. Now, let's do the series predictions for the test series between the West Indies and Australia. So let's do our series predictions in terms of the series winner, leading run scorer, leading wicket taker for the series. Some of my predictions for the series. So we'll start off with the series winner. And I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, really. I think Australia will win the series. I think on paper, they are the strongest team. The West Indies have a lot of challenges that they need to try and overcome in this 3 test match series against Australia. So I think Australia to win. The margin of victory, probably 3-0, 2-0 or 1-0. Depends on the weather. You never know in the Caribbean. You may get an unexpected cyclone or storm. But let's hope we don't get impeded by the weather across the 3 test matches. But I do think Australia to win the series, either 3-0 at least, maybe 2-0 or 1-0. Depends on the weather, but Australia should win the series at the end of the day. In terms of the leading run scorer for the series, I've gone with Travis Head. Now, given Australia's inexperienced top order at the top, Travis Head, senior statesman, we all know what he's done over the last few years. He's been in good form. I think he could be the leading run scorer for Australia in the series. So I've gone with him as the leading run scorer for the series across the 3 test matches. Leading wicket taker, I've gone with Pat Cummins. What he did in the World Test Championship final was superb, and he always does it. He always bowls those match-winning spells. So I've gone with Pat Cummins as the leading wicket taker, I should say, in the series. He's going to have a big role to play. But if we're honest, really, the Australian bowling attack, Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood, Lyon, you've got Kuhnemann, Scott Boland, you've even got Bo Webster. All of them can do a job. But if I had to choose one for the series, leading wicket taker for the series in general, Pat Cummins I've gone with. So those are my predictions on how this series will go between the West Indies and Australia. And let us know your series predictions in the comments. We would love to hear what you have to say. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know in the comments your series predictions. We would love to hear what you have to say. Some final remarks and some of my observations and what to expect from this test series between the West Indies and Australia to finish off our preview of this test series between the West Indies and Australia. First of all, I would like to say it's good to see Australia and the West Indies playing a test series in the Caribbean. I think everyone is happy to see that. It's been more than 10 years, 2015 until now, so more than 10 years since Australia played the West Indies in the Caribbean. So it's great to see the West Indies and Australia playing a test series in the Caribbean. It's also a 3 test match series as well, and I think a lot of people are happy that that's the case rather than the 2 test match series that we've seen between the West Indies and Australia for some time. I think everyone will expect that it may be a one-sided series given how Australia are probably favourites to win, and as we've talked about throughout this preview episode today, is that Australia are the favourites on paper. They are. The West Indies have a lot of challenges that they have to overcome in this series. I think what people expect from this series is probably Australia to win the series, which is a fair assessment. But I think people expect the performance from the West Indies, whether or not that will be consistent, whether or not it will give West Indian supporters some hope in terms of rebuilding. Roston Chase, the new captain. You've got Darren Sammy, who's the new coach of the Test side. And we hope that the West Indies can start to turn things around. It's been a long, process for the West Indies in terms of trying to turn things around. They've had a lot of setbacks. They've had a lot of failures. This series against Australia, hopefully for them, will be the start of something. They've talked about that in the lead up to the series, that we want to play a different brand of cricket. We want to, try and be consistent. We want to try and be competitive. So I think if you're a West Indian supporter, I think the expectations is can the team be competitive? Can the team be consistent? Can someone score a big 100? Can someone take a 5-wicket haul? Some standout performance in the series. It's going to be a tough ask to try and win the series, but if you can show a bit of consistency, a bit of competitiveness, someone scores big runs with the bat, 100, scores 100, 5 wickets for a bowler, then I think that's a good result for the West Indies in terms of their rebuild and going forward. But nonetheless, it's probably going to be an exciting series, and we're probably going to see some standout performances from both sides. Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully we see a competitive test series. We don't want to see a one-sided series, which is probably what people have expected from this series, is that it could be one-sided, given Australia's strength and given the weakness of the West Indies at the moment. That could be a possibility, but let's hope we see a competitive series throughout the 3 test matches. Let's hope we see some absorbing test cricket. Over the last few weeks and months, we've seen some very good test matches around the world. So hopefully that's the case in this series against the West Indies and Australia. But only time will tell once the 3 test matches are completed and done. Thanks everyone for listening to our preview of the test series between the West Indies and Australia. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on this test series between the West Indies and Australia in the comments. We would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.